there, welcome back to Painting with Artie Julie. Today I'm looking at painting this windswept hillside, a sort of abstract landscape using cling film, a bit of salt and a bit of spatter techniques. The following video will show you step by step of how to do it, but you can also download the instructions if you go on to patreon.com/ArtieJulie. Okay, let's get going. Okay, so we're going to make a start on this little picture here. I'll just show you again what the picture is. It's an abstracty windswept hillside with this tree blowing across here. You can choose whatever colours you want to with this, but I'm just going to use the same colours I've used here so you can see what's going to go on with it. So we're going to start with background to foreground. So first of all, we're going to put a wash over the background. So I'll just mix up some colours for that. And I'm going to use a little bit of cerulean blue for the top, and then perhaps getting it a bit warmer with a bit of yellow ochre down here. And then this part we'll do separately in a moment. So we're just going to start with the background on that. Just put that to one side. So to get this background nice and smooth, we're going to wet the paper first. It has to be watercolour paper. It won't work on cartridge paper or anything like that. It has to be watercolour paper. And this is Bockingford, and I think this is about 300 gram weight Bockingford paper. The thicker the paper, the easier watercolours become. So the heavier the weight paper, the less it'll cockle and bend. Or of course you can pre-stretch it first if you wanted to. So I'm wetting the whole of this paper, or at least 3/4 of the way down here. So it's staying glossy wet, but there's no puddles sitting in it. So the board has to be tilted slightly. I use a big soft brush, a mop brush, to put the water on with. And then I'll paint with a nylon round brush. And we're just going to put some of these colours in here now for the background. So this is just a bit of blue for the sky. You can, for this particular one, I'm just having a very simple bit of colour into this area. We're not going to go too mad with the sky because we want the interest to be in the foreground, not to distract from the background here. My masking tape is not doing too well today. It keeps sticking itself. I think it's because it's a bit warm in here. Oops, don't let your tissue drag over your paper, otherwise it absorbs the paint there. So I'm just putting that little bit of paint across here. Then I'm going to clean the brush, swap to a bit of yellow ochre or raw sienna, something like that, just to give you a little bit of warmth into that sky. Don't put it too far into the blue, otherwise it goes green. So again, put your brush on, wiggle it around a bit so you can spread it around and just take it down. So this, the foreground will overlap this in a minute. And that's all we're going to do for the background, just a simple little wash onto the background there, just to put a little bit of colour into it. So before I let it dry, I'm just going to take any puddles off from around the edges, either with my brush or just running a little tissue around the edge. So what we don't want is a bit of paint running back there. It shouldn't take long to dry because it's quite warm in here today. So I'll just pause for a minute. While I'm letting that dry out, I'm going to mix up the colours I'm going to use for the foreground and the tree. So again, you can use whatever colours you want to on this, but I'm going to mix up a bit of the blues, some Elysium crimson here, again perhaps a little bit of burnt umber or yellow ochre or something like that into it. The blues and the reds will mix together and naturally make a bit of purple. Perhaps a bit of indigo or something like that to make a little bit of a darker area as well. So I'm going to mix those up there, quite strong and a fair bit of paint. So just while that's drying, I'll just mix up some puddles of those, the different colours there. Okay, that's nice and dry. Just a good way to check is to just feel it with the back of your hand and see whether it's damp or not. So now we're going to do the foreground, and onto the foreground here we're going to put some food wrap or cling film. And just before you start, make sure that it's going to fit properly. You want to just make sure you measure it out, that you've got enough to cover. And just think about the way you want the cling film to lie on the picture. If you have it completely flat, stretched out, you won't get any patterns to it. But if you screw it up into a little tiny ball, that won't give you any patterns either. So what you need to do is just gently let it crinkle, and if you can get it directional, you can have it vertical, or you can have it going across, or you can even twist it slightly to give you perhaps flower shapes, but we're not going to do that for this particular one. But you can just get it so it's got like a direction to it, and the paint will run into all the little crinkles. So now I've decided what I'm going to do with that. I might leave a corner back here and put some salt or something into that bottom there, like some flowers and things down the bottom. So we'll put that to one side. And now this is dry, I've got my colours ready and waiting, so those have to be quite strong for this. So they're ready and waiting there. I'm just going to wet the area that I'm going to put the cling film onto, and perhaps have it coming diagonally down the page here. So wetting across here, and all this has to go in while this is wet. It won't work if it's dry, so you have to work fairly quick with this. Swap to my big round brush again, so wet it with a mop brush, and then we're going to just pop in these different colours, some blues, or saying you can use whatever colours you want to, just bringing those down into here quite strong. So you want to get some different colours running into that. Perhaps I'll go in with a bit of the yellow ochre, put in the sky, and that will mix and make a green. That's a little bit stronger, or a bit of burnt sienna or something like that in there to give you different colours running through. And again, just trying to get your colour combination that you like in there. Let's have a bit of red, nice bit of pinky red in there as well, just give it a bit of oomph, bit of vibrancy. Perhaps a bit of bright yellow down the bottom corner here, where we're going to have a bit more flowers and things coming through. And that's a bit too much in bands for my taste. So I'm going to put a bit more blue down the bottom here, so you get that colour running through. It'll mix with the red and make a purpley colour to give you just some variation. I'm painting it vaguely diagonally, but it doesn't have to be. And then I'm going to just decide what colour I'm going to make the tree. So I've got a little bit of indigo here, a little bit of dark colour. So where the tree is going to go, I'll just put that little bit of extra dark in. So this will be like the roots coming down eventually, or the cracks in between the bits there. Oh, I've just washed my brush in my cup of tea now, so that should be an interesting colour. So let's put a bit more red into that, give it a bit more oomph. There we go. Something like that. Now, before that starts to dry, I'm just going to pop this cling film on. So you're going to have one go at this, and you're going to just drop it on there and just let it go into all the natural little crinkles. Oh, I was going to put a bit of salt down the bottom there. Let's just peel that bit back. Just bring that up to the top. And that should give me some nice effects with the cling film there. I've just peeled it back a bit, and somewhere about here, because I want to just put a pinch of salt in there to give me a few flowers. Just before I do that, I'm just going to brighten that red up there a little bit more. Give that a bit of a stronger colour to start with. Let's put a bit more of the yellow in. You can only do this while it's still wet. Let it run back under that cling film. If it's dry, it won't work. So a few bits like that, and then I say about 20 grains onto that little corner there. Try experimenting with different sorts of salts, because they have different effects. So the table salt is usually too fine. The big rock salt is too chunky quite often. But this coarse ground, if you just have a little salt grinder, that usually works quite well. It's a little bit of a puddle there. So I'm just going to clean my brush, take out any puddles off the edge here, because otherwise they'll give me a big cauliflower and a run back onto it, and just leave that to dry. So you can already see this cling film going into little patterns and shapes here. If you don't like it while it's still wet, you can just move that around and just give yourself some more effects if you want to. But as soon as it starts to dry, then leave it alone. So you can just leave it to dry and sit there and watch it for a few minutes if you want to. But I think what I prefer to do is actually start doing something with this tree at the top. So I'm going to swap to again a round brush, but this is just a 6 or an 8 round to start with. Something nice and dark for the tree trunk. I might just add a little bit of the red to it to give it a bit more of a purpley colour. This is indigo, but I'm adding a little bit of red just to add a little bit more interest to it. And I'm just going to let that colour just bleed under the cling film at the top here, so it seats in. And you want it about a third of the way in where you're going to start the tree trunk. And you're going to start off here, bring it up, nice one sweep, and let it drift away. Start again, always at the trunk, bring it up, lift it off. Again, just trying to get this wind-swept feel to it. A few little branches, perhaps have a little one down here. You wouldn't have many coming up the other side, but we'll just have a little one coming across there. So I can keep going with that now, adding more and more branches to it, but what I'm going to do is swap to a smaller brush now. This is a rigger brush. It's a long, thin brush. It holds lots of paint. I can add with my rigger brush all the fine twiggy ones now, and it might be easier for you to actually turn this upside down, so you're not leaning on your cling film, not doing anything with that. So you turn it upside down, start at a trunk and lift it off. Start at a trunk, lift it away. Bring it up and away. To get finer and finer, always start on a branch and just pull it away from it. It's easier than trying to push it up there. So it won't get thicker as it comes towards the end. You've got to get these nice fine little twiggy bits into it. And just make that a bit darker down here before I start getting into the little fine twiggy bits again. Just let them drift off as if the wind's blowing this away across over the side there. The more little twiggy bits you put on, the more effective this looks. So again, start at a branch, pull it away, and these are little ones coming across here, and a few more in the background. Perhaps a little bit of a twig down the bottom here. You might get another little brush or something showing up behind that one. Again, make it come through the tree there. So you can just play with that, put as many as you like into these areas. Just have a look at that the right way round again now, just to see how effective that is. That's quite getting there. I think you need to just break up one or two little bits so it's not so long in some places. So again, just put in a little twig or two into that, just to get that to look a little bit more depth into the tree there. What you could also do is do a very weak one behind, so water that down, and again, anything in this background you can just do the same sort of thing again, but paler, so it looks like it's further away. And again, that'll give you the effect or the illusion of little trees in the distance there, and you get this jumble of little branches. That's a little branch or two disappearing off into the background. So that poor little tree looks a little naked on its own there. I think it needs a few leaves and wispy bits coming off and away from it. So just a few more little twigs. You can go on for hours doing this. It's just great. Once you get into it, you think, oh, I'll have another little twiggy bit there and a few more over there, and that's it. So what it needs is a few little leaves going across here. So I'm going to go back to my thank you. I'm going to go back to my little round brush again. Just put a bit more colour onto that trunk because that's a little bit on the pale side there. And what we're going to do is flick on some leaves going across and away from this. Again, I'm going to turn this away because it wants it to go in that direction. Lots of different ways of flicking. I tend to put my finger out and just tap my brush on it. Some people go like that, so they flick it up and away. So it should give you that look as if there's little. So the more you load your brush, the bigger the blobs of paint. And I might actually put in some of the colours that I've got in the foreground here, some of the reds. And perhaps even a little bit of that blue, just to give it that harmony and a bit of sparkle to it. So that's probably enough of that. This salt effect's just taken effect now. You can just start to see the little flower shapes coming in. This is probably still a little bit wet. And the way you can test it, if you move the cling film and the pattern still, if it starts to move anywhere, it's still wet. So I'm just going to pause a moment before we have the great reveal. Okay, that should be, it's still a little bit on the damp side, but we can peel this off now, and you can see all that lovely patterning sitting there to give you your abstract treescape. And there we are.